I heard a man's voice in my shower before I even opened the front door, and for a second I honestly thought I walked into the wrong house. It was casual, relaxed, like he belonged there. Like this wasn't the first time. And my hand just froze on the doorknob while something cold started spreading through my chest because my wife was supposed to be home alone. I didn't go upstairs right away. I just stood there in the hallway listening, trying to convince myself there was a normal explanation, some stupid misunderstanding I could laugh about later. But deep down, I already knew, because this wasn't the first moment that didn't make sense. Alyssa had been different for weeks in a way I kept explaining away because it was easier than facing what it might mean. She started flipping her phone face down every time I walked in, smiling too quickly and saying, "It's just work," like she'd practiced it. And when I asked why she suddenly locked everything, she laughed and said, "You're being paranoid, Mike. It's embarrassing." And somehow I ended up apologizing like I was the one breaking something. Even my brother Daniel had made a comment a few days earlier, something small I didn't think about at the time. He was at our place, leaning against the counter, watching her walk past, and he said, "Man, you're lucky. She still looks at you like that." And I remember laughing it off. But now, standing there listening to that voice upstairs, that memory hit differently, like a piece of something I didn't want to see. The first real crack came 2 days before that. She told me she was spending the afternoon with her mom, said it so casually I didn't question it, until I found a hotel receipt in her bag from a place 10 minutes from our house, time-stamped exactly when she said she was with family. When I showed it to her, she didn't panic, didn't stumble, she just sighed and said, "It's for a friend, you're twisting things again," and looked at me like I was the problem, like I was slowly losing my grip on reality. So I tested her. I told her I'd be out of town for 2 days, watched her kiss me goodbye like nothing was wrong, and then I came back early. I parked down the street, sat there longer than I want to admit, staring at my own house like it belonged to someone else. And when I finally walked in, it was quiet except for the shower running upstairs. And that voice. I knew it before I even reached the stairs. I knew it before my brain would let me accept it. It was Daniel. I didn't burst in. I didn't yell. I just stood there listening to them laugh, and I swear something inside me didn't break. It shifted into something colder. When Alyssa stepped out and saw me, she didn't look guilty. She looked irritated, like I had just ruined her evening. "If you weren't so distant," she said, calm as ever, "maybe I wouldn't have had to find someone who actually listens." I remember staring at her, trying to understand how she turned this into my fault, how I became the problem in a story I didn't even know I was in. But what she didn't know, what neither of them knew, was that this wasn't the first time I came home early. I just needed proof. And this time, I didn't come alone. I didn't move when she said it. I just stood there trying to process how easily she rewrote everything, how quickly I became the reason she crossed a line I didn't even know existed. And before I could answer, before I could even breathe, my brother stepped out behind her like this was normal, like standing half-dressed in my house, in my life. Didn't require an explanation. He looked at me, froze for half a second, then actually had the nerve to say, "Mike, this isn't what it looks like." And I remember letting out this quiet laugh because it was exactly what it looked like. And the worst part wasn't even him. It was her standing there with her arms crossed like she was waiting for me to calm down, like I was the one about to overreact. I asked one question, just one, "How long?" And she didn't hesitate, didn't even try to soften it. She just said, "A few months," like she was admitting to something small, something forgivable. And my brother shifted behind her, avoiding my eyes, which somehow made it worse, because silence from him felt like confirmation of everything I didn't want to believe. Then she tilted her head slightly and said, "You've been distant for years, Mike. You just didn't notice." And I felt that twist again, that subtle pressure where she tried to bend reality, make me question my own memory. All the nights I thought we were fine, all the conversations that now felt staged, like she had already checked out while I was still showing up. I told her I had seen the messages, not all of them, just enough. And for the first time, something flickered across her face. Not guilt, not shame, just calculation. And she said, "You went through my phone? That's the real problem here." And there it was, the shift, clean and precise, turning betrayal into my violation. But I wasn't guessing anymore. I wasn't piecing things together in the dark, because the truth is, I had already known something was wrong long before that night, long before the hotel receipt, long before the lies started stacking up so high they couldn't hold themselves anymore. What I didn't expect, what I wasn't ready for, was who else was involved. I looked at my brother and asked, "Who else knows?" And he hesitated, just for a second. But it was enough. And when he finally spoke, his voice low, almost apologetic, he said, "You're not supposed to find out like this." That sentence didn't make sense until she exhaled sharply and said, "Just stop, it's already messy enough." And something about the way she said it, not defensive, not scared, but tired, like this had been going on longer than either of them admitted, made my stomach drop in a way I can't explain. Because suddenly, it wasn't just about them. It was about how many people had been standing around me, smiling, talking, acting normal, while this was happening behind my back. And then I heard a car door outside, and my wife went pale. I didn't understand why she went pale until I heard the keys at the door and realized something even worse was about to walk in. No panic, no scrambling, just this heavy silence as she stepped past me like I wasn't even there and whispered, "Just don't say anything yet." Which made no sense until the door opened and my best friend called out, "Hey, you left your..." and stopped the second he saw all three of us standing there. That was the moment everything tilted. Not shattered, just shifted into something uglier. He looked at me, then at her, then at my brother. And I saw it in his face before he even spoke, that split second of calculation, like he was deciding which version of the truth to give me. "Mike, you're home early," he said carefully, and I felt something cold settle in my chest because that wasn't surprise. That was recognition. I asked him the same question, same tone, same calm, "How long?" And he didn't answer right away, just rubbed the back of his neck like he'd been caught in something inconvenient, not devastating. And then he said, "It's not what you think," which by that point felt like a script they'd all memorized. I looked at her, waiting for her to deny it, to correct him, to laugh it off. But she didn't. She just closed her eyes for a second like she was tired of pretending. "Tell him," I said, and my voice didn't even sound like mine anymore. She exhaled slowly and said, "It wasn't supposed to overlap." And that sentence hit harder than anything else because it meant this wasn't one mistake, not one betrayal, but layers of them. Separate timelines crashing into each other in my hallway. My brother swore under his breath. My friend stepped back like he wanted distance from the truth, and I just stood there trying to understand how long my life had been something I wasn't actually part of. "You said you ended it," my brother snapped at her, and she turned on him instantly. I said I was trying, and then they started arguing. Not about me, not about what they did, but about each other. Like I was just the setting where all of this played out. I asked, "Who else?" Again, louder this time, and nobody answered, which somehow was the answer. Then my friend looked at me, really looked this time, and said quietly, "You need to sit down." And I remember shaking my head because sitting down felt like accepting something I still didn't fully understand. And then he said, "There's something you don't know about your marriage." And I swear, in that moment, I realized this wasn't even the beginning of it. I didn't sit down, I couldn't, because the second I did it would mean I was ready to hear whatever came next, and I wasn't sure I could survive it. I just stood there staring at him, my best friend, the guy who'd been at my wedding, who knew every detail of my life, and I said, "Say it," because dragging it out felt worse than the truth. He hesitated, glanced at her, then at my brother, like he was asking for permission, and that alone told me this wasn't new. This wasn't chaos. This was something organized, something they'd all been carrying without me. It started as just talking, he said slowly, choosing every word. She said you two were basically done. And I felt that familiar twist again, that quiet rewriting of history, like I had somehow missed the end of my own marriage. I looked at her, waiting for her to deny it, to correct him, but she just shrugged slightly and said, "We were drifting, Mike, you know that. Like drifting naturally leads to this. Like distance justifies betrayal if you say it calmly enough." My brother let out a sharp laugh, bitter and tight. "That's not what you told me." And she snapped back, "I told you what you needed to hear." And there it was again. That manipulation, that ability to shape the truth depending on who was standing in front of her. I asked, "So what, you just rotated?" And even saying it felt unreal, like I was describing someone else's life, not mine. And she rolled her eyes like I was being dramatic and said, "It wasn't like that." But nobody corrected the implication. Nobody stepped in to defend anything, which made the silence louder than any confession. Then my friend spoke again, quieter this time. "Mike, there's more," and something in his voice made my stomach drop. Because I could handle betrayal, I could even process layers of it. But the way he said that meant I hadn't even reached the worst part yet. "What more?" I asked, and I could hear the edge in my own voice now. That thin line between control and something breaking loose. He swallowed, looked straight at me and said, "The messages you saw, those weren't the only ones." I frowned, confusion cutting through everything else. "What are you talking about?" And that's when she stepped in. Too quickly, too sharp. "Stop, you're not helping." But it was already too late. Because now I was looking at both of them, seeing the panic, the misalignment, the cracks in whatever story they had been maintaining. "What messages?" I asked again, slower this time. My brother muttered, almost to himself, "He doesn't know." And my heart dropped into my stomach. Because suddenly, I realized something simple and terrifying. Everything I had found so far was only what they let me find. I felt it before I understood it. That slow, sinking realization that I wasn't uncovering the truth. I was being allowed to see pieces of it, like someone had been managing how much damage I could handle at once. And I said it out loud without thinking. "What else did you hide from me?" And my voice sounded different now, flatter, like something inside me had already checked out. She stepped closer, softer suddenly, like she was switching roles again. "Mike, you're spiraling. This isn't what you think." And I almost laughed because every time she said that, things got worse, never better. And I shook my head slowly. "Then tell me what it is." And for the first time, she didn't have an immediate answer. My friend ran a hand over his face and said, "There's a group chat." And the words didn't land right away. They just hung there, meaningless for a second, until they weren't. "A group chat," I repeated, and he nodded, avoiding my eyes now. "It started as jokes, then updates, then—" He trailed off, but I didn't need him to finish. I looked at her, really looked this time, searching for anything that resembled the person I thought I married, and all I saw was someone calculating how much to admit. "Who's in it?" I asked, and she hesitated just long enough to confirm everything. My brother answered instead, quieter now. "People you know." That sentence hit harder than anything so far, not because of what it said, but because of what it implied. And suddenly I was replaying every dinner, every laugh, every casual moment that now felt staged, like I had been the only one unaware of the script. "What do you mean, updates?" I asked, and my friend finally looked at me, guilt written all over his face. "She'd tell them when you were home, when you were gone, when it was safe." And I felt something cold crawl up my spine, because this wasn't just betrayal, this was coordination. She stepped in quickly, defensive now. It wasn't like that, it got out of hand, but I cut her off. Out of hand doesn't make a system. And for a second, she had nothing to say. Then I asked the question I didn't want the answer to, "How many?" And the silence that followed told me everything before anyone spoke. My brother exhaled slowly, like he'd been holding it in for too long, and said, "More than just us." I stared at him, my thoughts struggling to keep up. Define more. He hesitated, glanced at her again, and that was all I needed to see. Because whatever number he was about to say was going to end what was left of me. I didn't realize I'd stopped breathing until my chest started to hurt, until everything in the room felt too tight, too small for what I was about to hear. And I said it again, slower this time. How many? Because maybe if I controlled the pace, I could control the damage. My brother looked away first, which told me he couldn't say it, and my friend shifted his weight like he wanted to leave, like he didn't belong here anymore. But he stayed, and that told me he was deeper in this than I wanted to believe. She was the only one still looking at me, steady, almost impatient, like dragging this out was the real problem. "It wasn't a number," she said finally, and that answer was worse than anything else, because it meant there wasn't a limit. There wasn't a line she stopped at, just decisions she justified one after another. I felt my jaw tighten. "That's not an answer," she sighed, like I was making this harder than it needed to be. It changed over time, and I could hear it now, the way she framed everything to sound less deliberate, less controlled, like it just happened instead of being chosen. My friend cut in quietly. "Mike, there were at least 4, and the room went silent after that, like even the walls needed a second to process it, and I just nodded once. Not because I accepted it, but because my brain needed something simple to hold on to before everything else collapsed. 4, I repeated, and she flinched slightly, not at the number, but at him saying it out loud. "It's not like that anymore," she added quickly, stepping closer again, reaching for me like proximity could fix anything. That was before things got complicated. I pulled back without thinking. "Complicated," I echoed. And I almost admired the word. How clean it sounded compared to what it actually meant. My brother ran a hand through his hair, frustration breaking through. "You told me I was the only one." And she snapped back instantly. "You were the only one that mattered." And even he looked stunned by that, like he was just realizing he'd been handled the same way I had. I turned to my friend. "And you?" And he hesitated, just long enough. And I nodded before he even answered, because I already knew. The worst part wasn't even the number anymore. It was the pattern, the way she adjusted the truth depending on who she was talking to, how each of us thought we were something specific to her, something real, when really we were just roles. Then I asked the one question none of them were ready for, the one that had been building in the back of my mind since he mentioned the messages. "Who started the group chat?" And this time, nobody looked at her. They all looked at me. For a second, I genuinely thought I misread the room, that maybe I was projecting something onto their silence, but no one corrected it. No one laughed. No one even tried to redirect. They just stood there looking at me like I had finally caught up to something they'd all known for a long time. "What does that mean?" I asked, and my voice came out quieter than I expected. Not angry, not sharp, just tired. My friend spoke first, carefully, like every word mattered now. "It started as a joke, man." And I felt my stomach drop because that's how all of this seemed to begin, casually, harmlessly, until it wasn't. "You used to talk about how busy you were, how you trusted her, how you never checked anything," he continued. And I could hear it now. My own words coming back to me from someone else's mouth. I looked at my brother. "And you thought that was funny?" He shook his head quickly. It wasn't like that at first. And then he stopped, like he realized there was no version of this that sounded better out loud. I turned back to her, because at the center of all of it, it always came back to her. "Explain it," I said. And this time she didn't deflect, didn't flip it on me. She just exhaled and said, "You trusted me completely," like that was the answer. "That's what people are supposed to do," I replied, and I could feel something cracking under the surface now, not explosive, just inevitable. She nodded slightly, like she agreed in theory, but not in practice. "And it made things easy," she added. And there it was. The truth without decoration, without softening, and somehow that hurt more than any lie. My friend stepped in again, voice low. She made the group to vent at first, to joke about how you never notice things. And I felt heat rise in my chest, because now I could picture it. Messages sent while I was in the next room. Conversations about me happening in real time. And then, I asked. He hesitated, then said it anyway. Then people started asking questions, and she started answering them. I frowned, confusion cutting through the anger. What kind of questions? No one spoke. Not her, not my brother, not him. And that silence, that was different. Because this wasn't about what she did anymore. This was about what she let other people do. I felt my hands go cold as I looked at her. Really looked this time, searching for something human in her expression, something that told me there was still a line she hadn't crossed. Answer me, I said. She didn't. She just looked at me, and for the first time since I walked in, she didn't look in control. And that's when I understood. Whatever those questions were, they weren't just about her. I felt it click into place before anyone said a word. That quiet, sickening alignment of everything that didn't make sense until now. And I asked it slowly, like maybe if I softened it, it wouldn't be true. What did they know about me? She finally looked away. That was my answer. My friend stepped forward like he was trying to contain something already spilling out. Mike, it didn't start like that. And I almost smiled because nothing ever does it? Everything starts small enough to justify until you can't recognize it anymore. What did they know? I repeated, louder now, and my brother muttered, "Too much," under his breath, like he couldn't even say it directly. I looked back at her. You told them about me, and she shook her head quickly. Not like that. But there was no conviction in it, just damage control, just pieces of a story trying to hold together. Then like what? I pushed, and she hesitated again, just long enough, and I felt something inside me drop, not break, just settle into a place it wouldn't come back from. My friend finally said it, because she wouldn't. She'd share things, arguments, habits, when you were stressed, when you were out, when you were distracted. And each word felt heavier than the last, because it wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was exposure. It was my life being passed around like it meant nothing. And the questions, I said, my voice barely above a whisper now. No one answered. Until my brother did. They'd ask when it was safe, he said quietly. Who was around? What you'd notice? What you wouldn't? I closed my eyes for a second, just 1 second, because I needed something to hold on to before I lost control completely. When I opened them, I looked at her. And for the first time, I didn't see my wife. I saw someone I didn't know at all. You didn't just cheat, I said slowly. You planned it. She shook her head again, stepping closer, reaching for me like she could still pull me back into whatever version of reality she'd been building. It wasn't like that. It just happened over time. And I took a step back, because I couldn't let her touch me. Not now. Not after understanding what this really was. It doesn't happen like this by accident, I replied, and my voice was steady again. Too steady. The kind of calm that comes after something irreversible. My friend looked at me like he wanted to say something else, something worse, and I caught it before he could stop himself. There's still more, isn't there? I said. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. Because behind me, from the open front door I hadn't even noticed before, I heard a voice I never expected to hear in this house. Mike, I think you need to see this.